Welcome to the Moms I Know with Sheila Walsh-Dunton and Maria Anderson Farner. Two moms on a mission to reclaim childhood and take you from surviving to thriving on your parenting journey.
Hi, this is Maria, and I want to welcome you to the Moms I Know. Today I'm here with my mom, Elaine Anderson, and I'm so excited to have this opportunity to be interviewing her about her life and our family and the way in which she has been an influence in my life, as well as an influence on many, many other women and men. So I wanted to take this opportunity to really have us look at our relationships, mothers and daughters, mothers as our role models, mothers as an influence in our life and in the way they impact the future. And so here on our podcast, we're talking obviously with moms that we know and two moms that we know, and then we invite you to reach out to the moms that you know. And so Sheila and I today talked about doing this format where we're interviewing our moms, and then we'll be sharing more with you. So Sheila will be interviewing her mom as well. But first of all, I want to welcome you, Mom, to our podcast today. This is so exciting to have you here. So I'm going to let my mom, Elaine Anderson, introduce herself just a little bit.
Well, first of all, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to take part in a program that is of such great import to you and to women worldwide. In terms of my own life, I was born and raised in San Francisco, public schools, University of California at Berkeley, which truly was a defining moment in my life. I was the first in my family at large to attend a university. There was a great deal of support, and I had a very active university career, which continues to the present day. I stay in touch with many of my acquaintances from those years, long ago. And academically, I've always believed in lifelong learning.
Oh, I see. That must be where I get it.
That's
one of my essentials of life. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Home, health, family, and lifelong learning.
So what else do we need to talk about in terms of my biography?
Well, a little bit about where you grew up and when and what your life was like as a child and also as a teenager and then as a young woman. What were the parameters around when you grew up? And I think you had a very unique upbringing, and yet also it might have been very universal. So especially here in America.
It's more than likely that most of us have the personal and the universal aspects to our lives, and they differ, but the core is often very much the same. I happen to be the first child in the family. My father was an immigrant who survived the genocide in Armenia. My mother was born and raised in Fresno, but happily, when they married, they chose to live in San Francisco. And I had a very broad upbringing. Public schools were very diverse in that era, and I could walk to school, to Kate Kennedy Grammar and James Lick Junior High School. We lived in the Mission District when I was growing up. And when I went to Mission High School, this was a very cosmopolitan place. There were many, many Greek families, Italian families, Latino families. It was wartime. I was born in 1930, graduated from high school in 48, and went directly to Cal Berkeley. The neighborhood was friendly, open. I could walk to school without any problems at all. Sometimes, because the high school was farther away, I would ride the Muni for 5 cents. I still ride the Muni. I believe in public transportation. My family was very supportive, very loving. And because I was the first child, and because my father had lost so much in Armenia, there was just an atmosphere of love and respect. My mother always emphasized respect. No matter what you do, be respectful. And she was. And she was also very much respected. I grew up during the Depression, so there wasn't a lot of money, but we were never worried about where the next meal might come from. Mother was frugal, there was always enough. And the neighborhood was that way as well. Very open, very supportive, and very diverse. And that was a good thing to experience as a child. There was not judgment or attitude. We were just all in it together.
That's so lovely. One of my favorite stories is you talk about roller skating in the neighborhood.
These were funny little roller skates that clamped onto your shoes. You tightened it with a little key. And there was a hill, a wonderful skating hill about a block away. So one person would be at the bottom of the hill giving a signal, all clear. And we'd slide down that hill on these funny skates and skate all afternoon until fell down, skinned a knee, and had to go home bleeding. But that was a favorite pastime. And we could play in the neighborhood until the church bells at St. Paul's rang 6 o'clock, and we knew it was time to go home. So I think that became a kind of basic attitude in my life of not being fearful. People I know don't ride Muni, don't drive into the city. I do. And it may be a little foolhardy, but I think it has something to do with the way that I grew up.
You've always referred to San Francisco as your city.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
So that's so sweet. So those early years, I really am struck by that because, nowadays, even in the neighborhood here in the East Bay where I grew up, I don't see children out and about at all anymore. No. We grew up walking to school, playing in the neighborhood, and now I don't see a child in sight. Even the local park is sort of empty except on weekends when families might be out there. So this childhood of just freedom and trust and comfort in the city, the community in the neighborhood, that's so lovely to hear of that.
Well, it was certainly lovely to experience. And on weekends, we could hop on the Muni and go to the zoo or to Ocean Beach or swimming in Flashacker Pool.
Oh.
So it was, I think, the city at its best. And I'm very glad to have grown up in that atmosphere.
And then your high school years, what would you say was remarkable about those?
We had a very, very good basketball team. I went to all of the basketball games at Kezar Stadium at Golden Gate Park. We had a good football team. I was never a cheerleader, but I certainly did enough rah-rah. And my emphasis was on academics because I had to do all of the requirements for university acceptance. I only applied to Berkeley, and fortunately I was accepted. I can't imagine what I might have done if that had not been the case.
Do you feel that your education at the public high school really prepared you for University of California at Berkeley life at that point?
It did. It did because the faculty was really very professional. We had a lot of substance, a lot of assistance. I was not good at chemistry, but I managed to wiggle my way through. And so I did. I satisfied all of the requirements, including the language requirement.
What language did you take?
French.
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 Of course. I should have known that, but that's funny. I never thought about that in high school. I know that's what you studied later on. So, yeah.
Well, it was required. You had to have a language requirement. And
then on to Berkeley.
Went on to Berkeley. I keep in touch with some of those Mission High School friends, and all of them have matured gracefully, and we're all, I think, extremely grateful for the quality of that education, because it was truly at a professional level, and it gave us what each of us needed. So I'm a strong advocate for public education. All of my children went to public schools and on to universities. So it became a kind of guiding principle of our lives.
So we all went to the University of California, just different campuses. That's interesting. You talk about your college years, but yes, you have stayed very involved with the university. In fact, even throughout our childhood, when you were home with us, you were still very much involved. So can you tell us a little bit about those organizations, and then I'm going to steer us to your family life.
All right. First of all, there is the Brittanian Society. On campus, it's junior, senior women who were invited to join the organization on the basis of their service to the university and to the community. The motto is faith, service, and loyalty. And then the alumni formed an organization as well. And this has been my prime contact with the university through Brittanian alumni. We've been longtime supporters of the Bancroft Library. I continue that association, which is a most enriching one. We went to all of the home football games for many, many years, and that was another link to the university. My husband worked at the university for many years, so that obviously was a very substantial connection. And, the class of 52. I was a member of the class committee as a student. And then during the alumni years, we would meet as a group and plan reunions. And we had our 65th reunion recently, and there was talk about a 70th, maybe.
Oh, wow.
So this is a remarkable group of people. They were fine young people as students, and each of them has made, I think, a very valuable contribution to their communities and to society at large. Many of the men served in the military. They were drafted during the Korean episode. Some of them are old enough to serve in World War II, but not many. And they're just lovely people to be with. So the link with Berkeley goes on and is strengthened through these organizations. I'm grateful for that.
You also have your Daily Cal community.
I worked on the Daily Cal on the managerial staff. I might have been a better student if I hadn't spent as much time as I did on the paper, but I don't regret it. We worked hard. We had a lot of fun. We put out a paper that was called The Monarch of the College Dailies. And that little group continues to meet regularly. The numbers have declined, but the spirit goes on.
That's wonderful. It's just amazing. Well, I think that I get such a sense of how rich your education was and how it shaped so much of your life. And it's interesting to get this background because in one of our earlier podcasts, we shared one of my mother's quotes, and that is, "You can have it all, just not all at once." And I think this is a nice segue because at a certain point, after you graduated from the university, you met my dad. And so I want you to tell us a little bit about that and a little bit about your outlook on family life, and then we'll go into sort of your second career as well.
After graduation, I had a lovely trip to the East Coast, came back, and started to work and live in San Francisco. And in 1954, I met Ward Richard Anderson. He was working at an accounting firm, Arthur Anderson and Company, living in the city. We were introduced by mutual friends. He had just returned from Korea, and earlier he had graduated from Stanford, where he majored in economics. He earned a scholarship and went to Berkeley to earn his MBA. So he also was invited to join Phi Beta Kappa. Mm-hmm. So he was the intellectual powerhouse in the family.
I might argue that, but yeah, you well matched intellectually.
We met and we had a lovely evening with mutual friends, and I thought, well, that was fun, and bye-bye. But he called again, and eventually we married, and we have a lovely family, a son, Eric, daughter, Maria, whom you know so well, and another daughter, Nina. So over the years, we were fortunate to attend their weddings and to be witness to the birthing of their lovely children. Now, at this time, I have 7 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren, with 2 more on the way. So
we're growing.
We're growing. The numbers grow, and that is certainly the best of times.
So after you married Dad, were you still working for a while?
I was, until about a month before our first child was born. At that time, I was working on Powell Street at University Extension. They had a lovely building there, and I was an office assistant, enrolling people in programs and working Monday through Friday and enjoying it. And as I said, I worked until about a month before Eric was born. And then we bought a house in the Richmond district in San Francisco. We had been living on Telegraph Hill, and that was lovely. We could walk to work from there and feel very, very much a part of the North Beach community. But when it came time to buy a house, there was nothing available on Telegraph Hill that was within our budget. So we moved to the Avenues and lived in a little cottage there. And ultimately, when Ward left Arthur Anderson Company and went to work at the university at Berkeley, we decided that commuting was not a very sensible thing to do, and we moved to the home where I still live in El Cerrito.
That's interesting too, because when I asked about the retail, so the retail was really when you were younger, like in high school.
Oh, yeah. I worked at the Emporium when I was very young in high school, and then at I. Magnin and Company during the summer between high school and college. And so I feel like I've always worked. I helped support myself during the college years, and I lived in a marvelous little house on the south side of campus. It was a family home designed by Julia Morgan, and the owners agreed to do housing for women students because it was a large house with only 2 occupants. So there were about 18 or 20 of us young women housed at various levels within this lovely, beautiful home. And the house mother referred to us as her charges. And we became good friends after I graduated. And in fact, she and her family have a home at Tahoe Meadows on the South Shore. And we would go there every summer, generally around the 4th of July. So all of my little babies got to know Tahoe Meadows, and all of us love it and still go there, although Mary is not alive any longer. But while she lived, she was very, very much a part of our family.
Such an influence, such an amazing woman.
Yes,
So, yeah,
yeah.
a lot of fond memories. So you said, you've always kind of worked. So you stayed home after Eric was born and was, the mom who was at home taking care of us children, but you always had causes that you were passionate about. I always remember you being here when I came home from school. We had a lot of independence. We could walk to school and walk back, but you were always home. I remember you in, various parts of the house, always with the classical music playing in the background, busy with homemaking, but also with things that were important to you. So I feel as if you were always devoted to dad and us children, but you also never were at a loss for those other things that you believed in so deeply. So if you can talk a little bit about how you balanced the mom and the volunteer roles.
Well, it was important to continue interests. I was interested in politics. I voted for the first time in 1952 for Adlai Stevenson, whom I greatly admired. And so, marginally at least, I stayed involved in political thought. I've always believed in conservation, preservation of the environment. So I worked from home as a volunteer for Save San Francisco Bay Association. During the children's years in grammar school, I participated in the PTA, and that was a good thing to do. That was a way to have a say in my children's education. There was a strong movement toward busing in our community, and most of us supported that idea and were contributors to that effort.
In the late 60s.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's unfortunate that the main effort had to come from the schools. The real estate community did not do its part in diversifying neighborhoods, but the busing seemed like a good idea at the time, and we were willing participants. Getting back to the volunteer work, when our youngest child was just a baby, I did licking and sticking for Save San Francisco Bay.
We all did, yeah.
Addressing envelopes, about 500 a month, all by hand at that time. Mm-hmm. But I could do it from home. And as Maria mentioned, that was the mode in that era. Husbands generally were the main source of income. And fortunately, it was not necessary for me to work. I was able to be at home, but I did want to continue to be active in the larger world in some way. And Save the Bay Association was not only an activity, it was a learning process. The three women who founded the organization, Kay Kerr, Esther Gulick, Sylvia McLaughlin, not only were dedicated, but they truly gave their lives to making sure that the bay would be preserved. They had observed from their homes in Berkeley the desecration of the bay shoreline. It was a garbage dump, and that had to stop. And against all odds, they were able to stop it. Save the Bay was one of the first organizations to inspire the community and the nation. We had members from all over the country supporting the activity of these three very progressive, very able women. And Kay Kerr was the one who most emphatically insisted that we were not to be looked upon as little old ladies in tennis shoes. We were going to respond with facts, and we were going to be strong and courageous, really, because the odds were formidable. So that was really a very, very important part of my life. These women were true mentors, and what they accomplished is quite remarkable.
Well, I always thought you were the fourth. There were four of you.
No, there was a multitude of really dedicated people in all of the communities around the bay. There are 11 communities that have shoreline within the boundaries of the community, and each one of those communities had a very active organization, and they prevailed happily.
Yeah. Well, I think back to those days too. I remember we were one of the few families that was recycling, and you didn't, we would dry our clothes on the clothesline, not because we had to, but because that was what was, done. And then also we wouldn't hop in the car to run and get, one item. So I appreciate the fact that you were such early conservationists, and that the work that you did with Save San Francisco Bay Association has made such a difference. Were you also involved with Prytanean during that time? You stayed connected with Prytanean.
Yes.
And then were there any other, well, you always kept your connection with the Daily Count people, and and so a lot going on. So as a mother then, just in terms of your views on that, in terms of, you made the choice to stay home, but you said that was kind of the way in which the 50s, the 60s, when the husband was the main breadwinner and the wife would stay home. But I asked you earlier about that, and you said that if you had to work, you would have financially, but you're grateful that you were able to be home with us. And I know this is a topic that we talk about a lot with our listeners, and this concept of do we choose to stay home with our children? Do we choose to go back to work? Is it a choice or is it a necessity? How do we balance it? So I'd love to hear a little bit about your views on that.
I think now that women are not in the same position that I was in, I think many of them find that it's necessary for them to work. Many others who have an important profession feel as though they might lose something by stepping off that ladder upward. So the times truly are different, and I very much admire the manner in which younger women are able to do so much. Multitasking is what they called it, I guess, but the ability to balance has become more important in their lives than it might have been in my era of child rearing. And I admire that greatly. But as Maria mentioned, I've always felt that we can truly have everything, perhaps not all at once, but I'm not in a position to give advice. Mm-hmm. I don't think people want advice. Everyone has to choose their own path. But in terms of raising family, I was content to be home, and we just did everything together. And I hope for the current generation of young women, wives and mothers, and with new family orientations, find immense satisfaction in whatever path they choose. I think it's important. And I talk often to the undergraduate women in Prytanian, and their careers are quite remarkable. They're physicists, they're astronomers, they're in fields that women were not in my era. I had one friend who was in the College of Engineering, and she was the only woman in most of her classes, and she was subject to a bit of criticism, and she prevailed. She earned her Bachelor of Sciences degree and went on to do engineering work. But now women are in all the professions, scientific, medical. And when I speak to these young women, I end by saying how I wish them great success and satisfaction in their personal and professional lives. And this is my hope for all young women. And it's more of a challenge. They do have to do a little more balancing. They have to find support within their families as well as in their workplace. And I just hope for the best for each of you.
Well, it's interesting because one of my the major point that I'm making with SoCal Essentials is this idea of choice, that women, what we want is our autonomy, to have that freedom to choose what it is we do, to be wives or not, to be married, to have children, to have a career, and to be able to embrace all the facets that are available to us. And, right now we're seeing, just this wonderful surge of women in politics, which is so exciting to see. And of course, women in every walk of life. You mentioned that you lived in a Julia Morgan home in Berkeley. She's one of the first architects, and I know she had quite a battle and to really fought for that respect in her profession, and now is so appreciated. And yet when you talk about we can have it all, just not all at once, and this idea that we can take a pause, and I've been reading a few more books about that idea, that we can have our vibrant education and career and maybe choose to step off for a little while and raise our children. Sometimes, keeping a foot in the door, sometimes really staying in full time and balancing it with childcare and all of that.
Yes.
But, having been a woman in education for the past several decades, I do see the toll that it takes on the women, on the children, on the families. Both Sheila and I are real advocates of family life, of homeschooling, of alternative schooling, but not at the expense of who we are as women. So this whole concept of how do we find that balance? And so you were able to be home with us until my younger sister Nina went off to college.
Yes.
And so you were there for us. You were, really that incredible mother that took care of all of our needs and was that constant. And yet at that point, you chose, as Nina went off to college, to go back to work and have had an incredible career in that stage. So, no right or wrong, this or that, we do encourage people to follow their own path. And like I said, this advocate for choice. But I also want young women to understand that they can have that pause for whatever length of time that needs to be for them.
Yeah.
And that's a very personal decision. But for you, you were really home for all of our school years. And then as Nina went off to college, you chose to go back to work. So I'm wondering if you would talk a little bit about that phase.
Well, that was sheer coincidence. Nina went to Spain during her junior year abroad. And Ward and I had just the year before had a very long, lovely trip. And when Nina went to Spain, I thought, oh, we've got to get there. And I thought, why fly now and pay later? I could work and earn enough to buy the airline tickets. And so William Sonoma, a very popular, well-known
company, even
retailer,
right,
had an office in Emeryville, and the company had just gone public. And I thought, oh, I'll go work for Williams Sonoma for 3 months, maybe a year. And I went and applied, and I was 53 years old at that time, not thinking of a career at all, just a way to get back to Europe and to see Spain with Nina. They hired me, and then at the end of my financial needs, I liked the job. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just take a leave of absence and go see Nina with Ward and then come back and work some more. So they agreed I could take a leave of absence. And we went to Europe and we had a lovely time with Nina in Spain. And I came back to work and I thought, I'll do this for another year, maybe, just for the fun of it. And it also felt good to have my own income. I'd never lacked for spending money, thanks to Ward's generosity, but this felt good. So then I was asked if I would interview for a position as assistant to the CEO, chairman of the board, and also the founder of the company, Chuck Williams. And I said I'd have to think about it, check with my husband. And he said, go for it, see what happens. I interviewed, I was hired, and I served these two men, Howard Lester and Chuck Williams, as assistant. And the career lasted for 17 years. So it was so enriching. I learned so much. The two gentlemen had entirely different temperaments and interests and abilities, but there was an attitude of mutual respect. Chuck was the merchant. He knew what merchandise to buy for his customers. Howard had financial savvy, and the two of them worked well together. And I worked well with them, so it did become a true career. I retired at the age of 70, and I've kept in touch with them and with the company. Both of them are gone now, but I still maintain contact with family and with projects that have come up involving Chuck Williams' legacy. So again, getting back to this, having it all, but not all at once. I think that women who have the ability and the desire will always find a niche. And it may not be at the same level that they left off, but there's time to work your way back up. And now more than ever, competent, dedicated people are much needed in the workplace.
So true. Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that perspective and just this longer view, because I think that that's something that when I was in my 20s or 30s, there might have been this urgency. I've got to do it all now. I have to have it all now. I can't get off of that fast track. And more we're seeing women saying, wait a minute, I can't do it all right now. And so, really trying to assure young women that there's a time and a place and a phase in their life. And, just from the education perspective, really seeing that our children need us when they're very young. And it can be, a shared type of a thing with, the parents, the grandparents, the village, the extended family. We talk about that in relationships, but nothing takes the place of those years. And also you can't get those years back. And so I wonder if you have a little bit more to say about that in terms of.
Well, it occurred to me while you're talking that we learn from our children also. And it is just a gift to watch their progress. And take part in their interests and the paths that they choose. So it's a kind of mutual learning opportunity. And certainly the larger family, the opportunity for children to have access to grandparents or loving aunts or uncles or cousins is important. It's not as available now because families are so widespread, but with Skyping and all of the new technology, it's not impossible. And we can be influential and share our ideas and our beliefs and what we think is important. I was taken by a comment that President Obama made as he left office, and someone asked, what advice would you give? I said, well, no, I don't really give advice, but I do have words to live by. And the words were, be useful, be kind. And I think that says a lot. So I've taken that very much to heart.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's shown in everything that you've done throughout my life. You have been such an incredible role model. We joke in the family that I was 18 before I realized there were things my mom didn't know. And so, we chuckle about that a little bit. But this idea that family is so important, and I'm grateful to have grown up in a family where we were so close, and that the grandparents, the aunts, the uncles, the cousins were an integral part of my life. And I just thought that was the way it was. And now as I see, so many families didn't have that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so, sometimes we make choices around that, and sometimes we have to make choices that take us away from our families, but there's lots of ways that we can stay connected.
Definitely.
And I appreciate you sharing those beautiful words. Are there other people that you have been inspired by in your life?
So many. When I was in college, there was it was the era of McCarthy, and professors at the university were required to sign a loyalty oath. And one of my professors, Jacob Lowenstein, professor of philosophy, refused to sign, and he lost his position. He was exonerated years later, but I so admired the courage that he displayed. And there were also very strong and dedicated women. The Dean of Women at that time, Mary Blossom Davidson, supported me at a moment when I needed her understanding and her support. So she lives on in my memory as a very thoughtful, caring, understanding individual. And as I mentioned, the Save the Bay ladies were true mentors. There was another woman, Mary Lee Jeffords. I met her through Prytanian. She was probably the strongest environmentalist I've ever known. She served as head of the East Bay Regional Park District for many years. But there was a time when the board of the Prytanian alumni was being formed for the coming year. And she said, I want you to be the president of the board. And I said, oh, Mary, I can't do that. I'm not. No. And she looked at me and she said, if not you, then who? And I said, okay, all right. So she has been a very, very strong influence. And I think of the work that she accomplished and how much she meant to me and to several other young women at that time, just by the strength of her beliefs and her support of our learning and willingness then to say, okay, give it a try.
Nice.
I think that's what we as people can do for each other. Not just as women, but as men and women, to be supportive and to emphasize our values. And there was another woman, Lucy Ward Stebbins. She was also a dean of women, but when I met her, she was retired. And to me, through her manner and her dignity, she exemplified what I came to believe is the Berkeley woman, strong in her beliefs, honest, with a sense of integrity and purpose. So there have been so many pillars, and all of them have really given me a foundation that I can truly believe in. And over the years, as our heroes become subject to criticism and demeaning, it's good to have some who can be sustained in their ethics and in what they've done for their communities and for the world. And I must say that my parents were so strong. My father never displayed the attitude of a victim, although he had lost so much in the old country. And my mother's insistence upon respect has been a very, very firm foundation. So there's much to be grateful for, and there's always so much to learn. And I just, as I said earlier, hope that young women, young men will find their appropriate roles and will feel the courage to withstand some of the things we're seeing in today's world and go on and have their own impact on society. We need it. We need it very, very much. And I will be grateful for every bit of it that comes forth.
Well, I have no doubt that a woman will be interviewed in the future who, when asked that question about who was an influence in your life, will say Elaine Anderson. So it'll be fun to see that. So before we wrap up, are there any other things that you want to say? You had a beautiful reference to President Obama. Are there other quotes or mantras or both that you've lived your life by?
Not an actual quotation, but I've always valued honesty and integrity and ethical responses, and I've been fortunate to have that in my life. People have been strong. My dear husband certainly exemplified the finest qualities of professional integrity as well as intellectual integrity and service to the country. So those would be my bywords, not a real quote, but just words to live by.
Well, I sure appreciate you being here and taking the time today to record this, to have this conversation. I'm so grateful for everything that I have received from you. And I would imagine that our listeners have gotten a great deal out of this today.
Well, I hope so. I feel privileged to have the opportunity, and I must say that you and your brother and your sister and all your families have certainly enhanced and enriched my life. So gratitude is the byword too. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And for those of you who know me well and have heard, we talk about gratitude a lot. So what a fitting way to end this. So Mama, thank you so much for being with us today. To all of you, we hope you have enjoyed this. It's an era that is just so, with this era considered the greatest generation. My father gave me that book years ago, and I think that there is really something to that. So I'm so grateful to have been fortunate to be raised in this family and to have this time today. So thank you so much. And to all of you, we will be with you next time on The Moms I Know. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today for The Moms I Know. To learn more about Sheila and her online program, The Mom Map, visit purplebeetnutrition.com. For Maria's monthly blog and to learn more about her group programs and retreats, visit soquelessentials.com. That's SOQUEL essentials.com. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Moms I Know. Until next week, have a joyful family journey.